One of the oddities of the English language is that we classify surviving spouses differently. A woman is called a widow and a man is called a widower. Normally we classify a man first and adapt it for the woman. Actors become actresses, etc. In the same way, we accept within reason differences in the age of men and women. Yet, we do not disapprove of age differences between a man and a woman in the same way as same-sex marriages are still disapproved in some sections of society. However, we still find it peculiar and is the subject of media attention for celebrities. The current president of France, Emmanuel Macron, has a much older wife, Brigitte Rockno, 24 years his senior, who is also his teacher. The then US President, Donald J. Trump, was supposed to describe on meeting her that she looked good for her age. Donald, you could charm the birds from the trees. Why do people regard the idea of a younger man marrying an older woman unusual? Love comes into the equation, but sometimes wealth plays a part. The concept of the wealthy widow attracting suitors is a well-known theme in life. What happens when the differences in age begin to show? At the time of the marriage, both parties would be reasonably in good health, etc. But as John Donne famously put it, time and tide wait for no man. The honeymoon period is definitely over as one party complains of ill health. Does the spouse take it in good cheer and administer to the needs of an ailing partner and waste the best years of their life waiting for the grim reaper? Alternatively, they could have other ideas to rid themselves of this inconvenience and collect life's goodies. Tregonissey is a suburb of St Austell, which is in the centre of the China clay industry. Despite recent efforts to modernise it, St Austell still has not been able to avoid being called St Awful. Tregonissey's only claim to fame is that it is the birthplace of the renowned Tudor historian A. L. Rowse. It is doubtful that he will be remembered by future generations. The marriage of Ernest Edward Black took place in 1914. At the time of her murder, he was 36 and she was 50. She was a local girl who had lived in Tregonissey since childhood and owned some property and ran a local convenience store. He was not able to join the army due possibly to an earlier industrial accident. Consequently, he joined the Refuge Assurance Company as an insurance agent. To some, he was the pillar of the community. He sang in the St Austell Church choir and attended the local football matches as the Red Cross man. He was regarded as a fine man willing to participate in local events. Selling insurance, like putting your daughter on the stage, can be a very precarious business. And Ernest's choice of career certainly fell into that pattern. Insurance policy monies had been collected by Mr. Black, but there is no evidence of actual policies. Bad practice is not unknown in the industry. However, he was proved in court to have a very devious mind, as he fraudulently closed up a partnership involving Cunard's shares. There was obviously more to Ernest Black than some petty pilferings. On the 2nd of November, he was dismissed by his employer and proceedings were begun. Over to you, James, to describe what happened.
On the 21st of October 1921, Annie Nichols proclaimed that she felt unwell, and a week later she vomited at breakfast. As a result, the family doctor was called, who thought it was a case of ordinary gastritis, which is an inflammation of the stomach. 8 days later, Mr. Black purchased 2 ounces of arsenic from the chemist and signed the poisons register in his own name. Arsenic was and is still used in many industrial processes, but it is not used if one works as an insurance agent or runs a sweet shop. During the next few days, Annie was administered medicine by her husband, but complained that it tasted like pepper. Her condition deteriorated, and Dr. Andrew, the family doctor, became suspicious. On the 8th of November, Edward Black claimed that he was going out to buy cigarettes in nearby St Austell. He cycled from the house and was never seen by his wife again. He was only to return to the locality under police escort. Her condition got even worse, and on the 11th of November she died. Dr. Andrew refused to issue a medical certificate and inform the local police. More importantly, he sent a sample to the famed pathologist Sir Bernard Spilsbury. In the meantime, the police were making their own inquiries about the missing Ernest Black. They soon discovered that instead of cycling back with the cigarettes to Tregonissey, he caught the train to Plymouth. There he even persuaded a long-standing client to lend him £50 on the pretext that he was buying some furniture and that the money would be wired to them forthwith. He then vanished from the local scene. Given that he had connections up north, it was assumed that he was heading that way. Court proceedings were being conducted on account of his dishonesty, and warrants were produced to apprehend him. But Ernest Black was in deeper trouble, as a stomach sample showed that Annie had died of arsenic poisoning. He was now a nationally wanted man, as the mainstream press started to take an unhealthy interest in him. Police throughout the land were asked to look out for him. The key question was the presence of arsenic. The problem with arsenic is that it still has many applications, and it is still used today. Today, it would be strange if traces of arsenic were found in medicines, ointments, and tooth powder. But as they say, the past is a different country, and they do things differently. The autopsy proved that there was too much in her stomach not to show that it had been fed to her. In this case, the feeding was being done by Ernest. Despite his name being on the Timothy White's poison register, he denied its existence. This was not believed. The authorities were given their first proper clue when a letter was addressed to an acquaintance of the wanted man, a local butcher by the name of Joseph Kelly, which denied murdering the poor victim. It came from Burnley, where he was born, and the hunt was now directed towards Lancashire, and in particular Liverpool. On the 21st of November, a Mr. Stevens booked into a temperance hotel in Liverpool. Given that his details had been circulated throughout the land, it is not surprising that the police would later that evening arrest Ernest. But it was quite a night to remember, as the police had to force his door and caught him trying to cut his throat. He claimed that he had not seen a Red Cross book in the house for 12 months, with the page on arsenic poison bookmarked. One hopes that in the absence of the book, he was not called upon to administer aid to footballers and spectators at the St Austell Stadium. There are even shouts from the stands as to his whereabouts, whilst the police tried to locate the missing fugitive. Needless to say, at the trial, none of this was believed, and on the 24th of March 1922, he was hanged at Exeter Prison. Now, John, and this is a really intriguing case, what are your reflections on this incident?
There is a famous George Orwell piece on English murder during the war, entitled Decline of the English Murder, where a typical working-class Englishman, after a hearty roast, would send the children out for a walk. He would then settle down to read about a typical English murder from the news of the world as his wife dozed on the chair. Typical themes would be middle-class respectability, money or sex as the motive, poison as the means of execution, and the odd occurrence leading to their capture. 9 murders were examined between 1850 and 1925 as examples of this genre, of which the Crippen's case is still known to modern audiences. This was contrasted to the recent Cliff Chin murder, in which an American deserter and his recent girlfriend haphazardly ran over a woman for kicks. If we examine the background to this case, it would fit in neatly to the traditional notion of homicide. An outwardly respectable family man descends into murder and embezzlement. He sends a letter to an acquaintance giving the police the first proper clue as to his possible location. It is no wonder that there were queues at the courthouse. There have been a number of writers who have tried to exonerate Ernest Black, including Colin Wilson, who could be described as one of the angry men of literature in the late 1950s-60s. While he wrote extensively on the subject of crime, his knowledge of pathology was limited. He claimed that he had left 3 days before her death, and therefore prior to her demise. The amount of arsenic found in her stomach would contradict this finding. Contrary to the dictates of crime dramas, the victim does not drink the arsenic, clutches their throat, and dies spectacularly on screen. Arsenic is an effective poison but acts slowly, thus it could be very difficult to detect. In his famous study of suicide, Emil Durkheim classified various types of suicide. He describes a rare one where the murderer kills first a member or members of his family and then himself. This is called anomic suicide. Ernest's behaviour did not end in his own death, but he made a good fist of it. One of the causes of this type of behaviour is a sudden change of circumstances. To go from being a respectable member of the middle classes to a jail sentence and on release, the distinct possibility of the workhouse definitely shows a decline in one's social, economic and personal circumstances. A clue to his behaviour could be a heart tattoo on his wrist. Given the passage of time, we do not know the attitude of the Refuge Assurance Company to tattoos. Nevertheless, he could have easily hidden it at the interview. But why a tattoo? He did not come from a port or served in military overseas. Little is known about his earlier life other than he was born in Burnley and moved down with male members of the family to work in the China clay industry. Hence the reason why he ended up in Tregonissey. Prison records were very good, and there is no reason to believe that he ever was in one. Yet he was a petty crook and could have hung around with the wrong crowd. The then Home Secretary was Edward Short, who could not be described as a complete brute, unlike others who we have encountered in previous episodes. He pardoned Ronald Tuft on the grounds of possible insanity. If you think the current Home Secretary has an impossible in tray, please spare a thought for Edward Short. There was a civil war in Ireland, 1 million men to demobilise, the rise of communism, major strikes including 2 police strikes, and unrest in Liverpool and Glasgow. Once he retired from politics, he joined various statutory bodies, which we would describe today as quangos. The most famous was President of the Board of Film Censors. Needless to say, he loathed Hollywood. If you want to know more about this and other West Country murders, or catch up on all our previous episodes from the podcast series, please visit our website vintagemurders.uk or our own YouTube channel.